Good morning. How is everybody? Any sore heads in the room? Other than mine? Yeah, good, so thank you. I'm not alone. Thank you for coming. My name is Pritchard. Has anybody come to my Social Engineering 101 Part 1 talk? You did. Cool, okay. This is Part 2. Part 2, let's say in airplane technology. My name is Pritchard. I spent 12 years in Southwest Water, protecting their IT, but also their operational technologies and all the stuff that does with the clean water and all the wastewater. That was a lot of fun, very interesting. I spent 4 years at the Purple Palace, as it's known, which is Dyson, and that was also very interesting. Andy touched on DLP solutions. Do work. I can tell you that we used a DLP solution at Dyson, and it was successful in catching a botch internal spy who was stealing electronic motor technology before it was released to the public. The DLP solutions do work, and I can tell you that was part of that team, and that was quite a lot of fun. And for the last 10 years, I have been a penetration tester, and for the last 3-4 years, I've been focusing on regular stuff. And just in case you're really old like me, and you've got bad eyesight, I've got a picture of myself, just so that you know what I look like. Anyway, so that part 1 that I did in 2018, I think it was, in SteelCon, was talking about the real basics. It was an introduction for people who wanted to get into social engineering and couldn't go to like a social engineering class or a training or anything like those. It was just to get you into understanding how it works. But also from the defensive side, how you get into casinos, physical, national infrastructure, things along those lines. What I did in part 1 is I tried to stay away from hyperpush, because it's quite scary in some cases, and there are going to be some big words, I'm afraid, type words. So this is going to go in a bit more detail. I'm going to start you off straight in with typology, because it's an interesting topic and really, really relevant. Anybody know who this is? No, I'd be surprised. This is George Armitage Miller, who is a Harvard professor of psychology. And in 1956, he published a journal, and he talked about the magic number 7. Now, the magic number 7, plus or minus 2, is basically our limit, in theory, to our capacity to process information, our cognitive limit. And this is really useful for a social engineer, because you can potentially buffer overflow someone's brain by giving them more than 7 pieces of information on an average human. We're not talking about supercomputer type people. And it's basically saying that roughly your short-term memory can hold, plus or minus 2, 7 pieces of information. Now, this is really important. It's really important. Now, I just want you to know about it and remember it, because I'm going to talk about it in a bit more detail later. But I'm also going to reference it and see why some of the things that we do with social engineers work. Okay, so that's the first bit of psychology out of the way. Let's move away from it, and let's talk about how we are going to break into something. Because that is our task normally as a social engineer, we're trying to get into something. Now, hopefully you will have seen in that first talk that we talked about OSINT. And we'll talk about doing open source intelligence in concepts, probably from your home office or wherever you are, your bed or wherever you work from. And I'm going to assume that you've done some of that OSINT for your target, and you've got a whole treasure trove of information. It could be where the office is located, it could be the number of staff that are based there. You might have used Google Maps, for example, to look at where the entrances are. You've built up a whole list of information that's going to help you. The next stage I do is the on-site. Now, this means actually physically going to the target office, which hopefully the client has set you a target office. There might be multiple, but you might pick one. And we want to ask ourselves some questions. Now, first one I ask, why are we here? What are we supposed to be doing? Has the client given us a target? Andy talked about getting train admin. Just getting into the building might be sufficient for this particular client, but they might expect you some targets in turn. They might go, we need to get the red folder from the finance department because that's how the company results. We're not published yet. Something along those lines. So what are we trying to achieve? These are important things to take a note of. And then, what do we need to do to actually get in that place? What do we see? What have we got? What's there? So, some of the details that we could look for that might help us, and they might be, what does an employee badge look like? Now, hopefully, if you've done your open source intelligence well enough, you've probably got an idea what that employee badge might look like. And essentially what you're going to be doing is confirming what you found in your instance to what's actually real. Now, we all know that these days camera phones are fantastic. I have got a Samsung. It's got a 50 megapixel camera. Now I can tell you, I can take amazing videos of employees walking into the office all with their ID badge on, and I can take stills from that video and get really good, clear, quality pictures of what an employee badge should look like. Because I can then reference that. What is the employee entry process? Is there somebody just badging into a door reader and it goes beep and it opens the door and they get in? If you do any social engineering in service offices, for example, in London, for example, you will often find that there is a managed service provider, a guard, that is assigned to the building rather than to the company. He is just visually checking bags as people walk in. The important thing there is, there could be 7 or more layers on that building, or office floors, and there might be different badges. And so, already, the security guard has got 7, technically, or more, ID badges that he needs to know the list of files. Now that's typical, because he does that. He remembers what all 7 of those files look like. And in theory, he's probably just taking half a run. Probably just going, yeah, that person's got an ID badge on. Great, you can go. Now, the entry process might be more complicated than that, and I'm going to talk about some multi-layered entries that are far more fun to get through. And you just want to know this. What does it look like? How does it get in? And then, are there multiple entry points? Front doors tend to be the most secure because that's what everybody's going to do. Is there something around the back? Something around the side? Is there a delivery bay or something along those lines? That you could potentially get in that would be easier because it was less secure, and less monitored, and there might be a CCTV camera there, something along those lines. Get in there. But also, 3 layers. Now, I'm going to give you an example of this a little bit later in the talk. There might be multiple layers. There might be a perimeter. And it might be really big, and there might be just 3 or 4 gates, all stood there with an armed guard, for example, and that might just be the first layer. There might be someone just visually inspecting your badge, like holding it up. They might take it, for example, if you go into the ministry and actually take your badge and physically see it, make sure it's changed. So once you get into that layer, what's next? Because you probably want to get into an office or something, and that layer is different. How that badge works there might not be a digital inspection, it might be electronic. Take it on a badge reader, feed directly in. So how many layers are there? Important to know. If you were seeing something that is a big perimeter, there are likely going to be multiple layers, not just one. Think about that and think about how you would get past each of those layers. So, sticking on that layer thing, be prepared for it. Because it's more than likely, and again, service officers is a great example, big military installations is another great example. There are bound to be more than one. Every part of the first one is normally, relatively easy, unless you're facing something like this, for example, there's an armed guard there, physically taking the badge, and that's going to be making it a little bit more difficult. Now, that picture back there is an example of an engagement that a colleague and I did last year, and that was an armed team. And there was literally an armed guard with a gun, stood there. He didn't want to touch your bag because there's still some sort of COVID hang-ups going on, which was lucky for us. But he didn't want to sit. He wanted to see, he wanted to wind down the window, and he wanted to see it. So I held it out, visually inspected it, and it worked. It visually closed basically the bag, but it worked, and it got me past my guard. Now, getting into that bit was relatively straightforward. It was a bit hair-raising because there's an armed guard there, obviously, and us in the UK is quite tough for people first. So confronting those and being able to get past them is a little interesting if you're not used to it. But that got us entry into the ground. Nothing more. It was a massive estate. I think we calculated that the perimeter was about 5 miles round. About 8 or 9 really massive buildings. Very special. But getting us in there, literally got us into the ground. Nothing more. So what's next? Well, we parked up, we tried to get into an office, and that's it. That's a challenge. Now, we visually closed the badge, we had not electronically closed the badge. So we knew with our badge was going to do nothing when we held it against the party. How do we get past that? Good. Okay. Well, what was really great was there was a little intercom button just there, and we went, "Hi, it's Chris from the IT team, but over in the UK office, and my UK badge is not working in the US office. What do I do?" "Oh, no problem. Go and stand in front of gate number 123, and I'll buzz you in." Sorry, what? I just entered a secure military-style facility that has got supposedly some of the best security in the world, and I said, "A UK badge is not working in the US office." Okay. This is it. You see this gets a lot, I think. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about visually closed badges. And let's remember that Miller's law. That's 7 plus or minus 2, because that's really important. So, when I talked in SE Part 1, I talked about how badges are worn. Are they on a lanyard? What colour is the lanyard? Is it more on the hip? Is it more on one of the lapidated hips? Is the lanyard straight down? Is the badge holder straight down? Is it side to side? All of those things are important to clone and copy. Are there any trinkets on there? How can you make that badge look as close as possible to what the real thing does? Because if you can get the 7 plus or minus 2 things roughly right, you'll get in. You do not have to be absolutely perfect. Now, that is what I wore to break into a major UK airport. That badge is blank. It is a plain white badge, and all I was doing was emulating the fact that they had trinkets on their badge holder. Nothing else. The colour was close, but it wasn't spot on. Did it say the airport name on it? No. It was just black. There was no text on it. But again, I got some things right. So in terms of, does it need to be perfect? No, it doesn't. It needs to be close. Unless you were going somewhere that was proper trained, really obscure, doesn't need to be spot on. No, it doesn't. It needs to be close. 7, plus or minus 2. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. They do, yeah. And if you spot that, if you're hosting on your on-site recon, and that's basically what I was doing there. I saw that a lot of employees, not every employee, but lots of employees had got bits on their badges, and so I copied it. Because it made me blend in more. It made me look like, well, this person's been working for this particular airport for 5 years, for example. They're comfortable enough to wear trinkets on their lanyard. Great, I'll do the same, because I'm emulating something that works. Yep. So, let's delve a little deeper into how we can make a badge look more realistic, rather than just my friend's white badge with the top. So hopefully during your hosting phase, you've discovered what a badge looks like roughly. And hopefully you've knocked up something similar-ish, close. And I'm going to give you an example here of me searching for an employee ID badge. This is an example, alright? This is not the real thing, this is just an example. But if you go onto Google and you search the NHS and an employee ID badge, it gives you an example of what it could look like. Now, to clear disclaimer down the bottom there, do not hack or SE the NHS because the NHS are bloody amazing. But they are publishing on their website what badges look like. Because they have to. Because they have safety concerns around people tending to be a doctor or something along those lines. So they have to publish their badges and stuff like that and what they look like. So let's move away from the NHS because we don't want to have the NHS. Brilliant. And let's make one up. Now this guy is a model employee. That's not model, comma, employee, that's just model employee. So I've knocked this up. Some distinct things here. Where's the picture? Bottom left, great. Some colours. Black, possibly green. The company name. Social Engineering 101. Employee name. The logo. Little Mexican skull thing at the top there. You need to copy that. You need to emulate that. That's quite easy. It's a nice clean cut example, right? Because it's my picture I made up. So that's easy. What you often find is that when you go and search for these sort of badges on LinkedIn and stuff like that, people are brilliant at posting on LinkedIn. Hey, it's my last day at the company. I'm going to hand in my employee ID badge. And I think it's a badge. What age? Don't do that. Well, do. Please carry on doing that. It makes my job really easy. Yeah, it's the difficulty is things. You know, when you look at pictures and camera phones are great at doing this, they emphasize certain colours and other colours back. So the colouring is not always perfect. It could be close. I suggest you practice those colouring before you get on site, but get close. Get as close as you can. How can you make those better? Especially the colours, because the colours is one of the things that people look at and go, oh, that's blue and it's black, or something along those lines. Well, the easiest way to get those colours right is to look at them. And you'll often find, just to say a few times, that the marketing team, because they want to publish and, social media type stuff out and want other people to copy it and generate stuff, they will often put the hex values and the RGB codes exactly to what the things should be, what their company colours should be. Now, great, thanks very much, that really helps. And again, I'm going to use the NHS here because they do exactly this. They put the core colours off all of the badges. And again, as my disclaimer at the bottom, do not hack the NHS or SE them. They're absolutely amazing. So they are a perfect example of a company that publishes every single colour. They're not just putting their blue up there, they're putting every single colour up there. Greens, yellows, the whole lot. So for me, making a badge as realistic as possible, this is the cost. Now, there was a trade-off. There was a balance here, right? And we all know this balance. Somebody in the world is trying to make their job easier because they do not want to ask questions of what colour people are using when they're trying to post social media. those lines, or make marketing material or booklets or whatever. So there's a trade-off, there's a balance. But in this particular instance, and again, depends on your plot model, this is useful to me as an FD. Personally, this is really, really helpful. And I had an instance recently where I couldn't get colours right. I did exactly this. I looked at the marketing, I got a badge and made a badge, a visually changed badge. It was spot on. It had some really unusual colours in there. I owned it visually by looking at the marketing website, published all of the head values. Thanks very much. Going back to Miller's Law, on that service plus or minus 2, one of the challenges that I get asked about quite a lot is how do you put make the badge more secure? And to me, that isn't the right thing. Because the badge itself visually is never going to be secure unless the person inspecting it is trained. Exactly and how it should feel. Hologram. So some people put hologram logo on their badge. And they think, brilliant, got a secure badge, nobody can copy it. But I have not got a badge that do hologram. And so I just do grey. It's not a holographic image, it's just a grey logo at the bottom that's supposed to look like a hologram. And it works. And again, it's that Miller's Law thing, 7 things. If I can make it look as close as possible, it will actually work. Brilliant. Get asked this quite a bit as well, some badge printer recommendations. The 200 is quite nice. There is a 100, which is the cheaper version, and then there's a 200, and then the difference between the two, the difference between the two is the 200 does full edge. Now, is that relevant? Why? No. I think the 100 has got a 2mm gap around the outside that it can't print up to. But if you think about how most people put their badge in a badge holder, the little line over the top of the badge and the bottom of holding it in, just do that. So you're not going to keep happening anyway. No problem. Buy the cheaper one. There are lots of cheap ones on eBay as well. These walls, some of them are very, very well used, and not ideal. But do hunt around because there are some bargains to be had on eBay. So does this bag need to be? No. Doesn't. Miller's Law. Think about Miller's Law. 7 things-ish. That's what it just needs to be real. Nobody actually going to an ultra-secure military site who's going to look at your badge that costly is going to notice minuscule difference. So, go for it. Try it. And I'm going to tell you a war story, but for NDA reasons I have changed the quote and changed the badge. So, took back a job in the US a little while ago that a colleague and I did, and we visually turned back based on us sitting outside the facility, sitting at the bus stop, sat on a bench at the bus stop, and we used our camera phones, and we took very good quality pictures and videos of what a badge would look like. I had the badge printed with me, we went back to our hotel, and we visually phoned. We got together and we visually phoned what the badge looked like using the marketing schemes, colourful. Brilliant, thanks very much. We got in past the armed guard, we got into the next section where the man-sat gates were. Did the US badge thing doesn't work, they let us in, thanks very much. But that got us in once. And what we really wanted was to see. So how could we get a real badge? Genuine, real badge. Now, again, we've done a lot of those things beforehand because it was a big job, a lot of time, and we found employees, genuine, real employees, and we've taken people who were working in the UK office, copied their names, put our pictures on their badge. And so we thought, okay, this is really interesting. We've got in one, we want to see that. How do we do that? I know. And so we went down to reception, and they went, "Hi, it's Pritchard here from the UK office, and I'm a model employee, isn't it? And my UK badge does not work." Went, "Oh, yeah, no problem. We've upgraded the badge system recently, and we'll give you a new one." Ooh, thank you. And I handed over my UK badge, which was this one here. Looked at the badge. Looked at me. Looked at the badge. Typed my name into the computer. He looked at the computer screen. Looked at the badge. Looked at me. Went, "No problem. Give me 2 seconds. I'll send you one out." Bring out the badge. Now, pay close attention to my face. And pay close attention to the badge that I was given in return. And you may notice some slight differences there. Obviously, I've changed the picture. So that was that again. Absolutely basic. But it's that Miller's Law thing. There were 7 things there roughly on that badge that were correct. The logo was right. The name was right. The colours were right. Most of the things on that badge were right. Apart from the beard and my bald head. Wasn't quite so right. Yeah. So that was fun. And that got us to that. And the thing that was really, really important there is that both myself and my colleague and I wanted to test whether it was a process failure or whether that was a human failure. Because that's really important. When you're writing a report, you really want to know the process at fault or the human at fault. And we didn't want the human to be at fault, and so we waited. We did one in the morning, and then we did another batch swap in the afternoon. And there were different people on the desk on the front desk that I should change, and it was a person. Sorry, it wasn't a person problem, it was a person. So, one of the things that I find really important, and again, get asked a lot about, is being flexible. And I'm not talking about being yoga. I want to know how we deal with things when your plan isn't, well, going quite to plan. And this can have lots of connotations, and you need to be flexible. You need to think about things that are slightly out of the box. And what I do is I sit and work on my pretext, and I work on terminology. If I can, I try and emulate a IT support person, because that's my background. I'm a service desk, and I know that terminology. It doesn't always work. I can't always tend to be an IT support person, and so I might have to be a finance person. Great. And cloning that person or visually cloning that person, what kind of terminology are they going to use? Look it up. Think about some phrases and stuff like that. And then think through some of the challenges and the hurdles that you might get presented with when you're trying to get into it. And again, this is pretty dependent. I'm in the UK office, I'm in the US office right now, kind of thing. It's quite easy. I don't have to do an accent. So that works quite well. But what I do, and this is unusual, maybe, is I talk to myself in the mirror. But the more I practice those sort of things, the easier they flow. And what you want is, you want answers to come from your subconscious, because answers from your subconscious come up quicker than answers from your conscious. If you are asked a question or a challenge, you go, chances are somebody's going to be suspicious. You can do it quickly. Oh yeah, I'm over here from the UK, blah, 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 blah. Easy. No one's easy. Plus, it means you'll be ready to handle surprise. And I've got a great surprise. One to talk about, and that is, again, same job over in the US, and we didn't realise, and this was a nice surprise, it was helpful for us, that there was a conference going on for the company that we were part of at the time that we were there. They got lots of their employees all around the world to come to that particular branch, their office, for a week. We were there for 2 weeks. First week we were there. Imagine our surprise when we went down for breakfast in the morning and all of these employees were around us, all wearing their ID badges on their lanyards on their belt. Brilliant, this is fantastic. Then we could quality pictures, etc. We could try and eavesdrop, get some terminology. The downside was I then stepped in a lift to go back up to my room to go and get my rucksack, and somebody from that company got in the lift at the same time, and I happened to be wearing one of their t-shirts with the logo on. And she said, "Oh, you're from that industry, great, where that's you from?" Like, ooh, you know, but I practiced all of these things beforehand, and so the answers came up quickly. And she had no clue whatsoever that I was not actually from that company. I was spoken here and I was at top. But that was a massive, massive top. So you have to be prepared to be positive, because who could have predicted that I would have been in a lift with one of those employees in my hotel? So practice those things. I'm going to drop back into psychology again. I'm going to keep it nice and light and a bit gentle for you. And the first thing I want to talk about is making an entrance, an active comment. And what I'm going to suggest you do is own a previous mental state. Now, this sounds difficult, it's not. It's very straightforward. And I've got an example. Really, really easy example. When you go on holiday, the first thing you do probably, like, let's say you turn up in the evening and you go bad and you wander around, have a look at where things are. The next day, hopefully, going to the pool. One day, go to the pool. Now, normally when you walk into the pool, you don't know the layout. You don't know where things are. Where do I get towels from, for example? Where's the bar? You know, all that sort of stuff. And the sunbed's been reserved. Any of that kind of thing. And so you were probably going to be looking there, and you're probably going to be stood there, and you know, my wife and I went on holiday recently, our holiday pictures, and we walked into the pool area, and we're like, hey, what do we do? Where's the towel bar? Where's, you know, the sunbed, etc., etc. However, when you go there the next time, you know where those things are, and you know what the different processes are, you know where the towel bar is, and you know where the fresh towel bar is. You've been there since day one, and you've learned that stuff. And by the time you get to day 5, you know, you've bagged you the cabana, and you've got a nice table as well near it, and you've got a beer, and you're nice and happy and happy. Think about the difference in your mental state from day 1 to day 5. Day 5, you're confident. Because you can probably walk in, you know, with your chest thrust out, for example, and go, I know where I am. And then you start seeing the other newbies who have arrived, and they're on their day 1, and they're a really obvious spot, because they're also walking on going, oh, where's the sunbed, where's the house, where's that? So think about your day 5 mental state, and think about how you can replicate that. Think about your body, your mentality, your actions, etc. And you just need to replicate that state, and you will come across as confident. You don't have to actually be confident. And talking about body language and behaviours, drop it a little bit as well. I do recommend that you are aware. I don't say you have to study it religiously, but I do recommend that you are aware of body language techniques. I recommend being aware of these before you go on site rather than after them. Just like to do a bad thing and just going to get caught out. I have a suggestion. There's a guy called Joe Navarro who is the ex-lead FBI interrogator. Dealt with a lot of getting questions out of a lot of those bad criminals, the FBI. He has a top 10 body language traits and talks about things like the person with the lips, the puffing of the lips, protecting your neck, for example, touching along those lines. Really, really good. And then, when you've got those and you've written them down and you've learnt them or whatever, what you then want to do is go out into the real world and you want to observe. Now, observing without staring is really important. You don't want to do that. You want to observe without being too conspicuous and without unsettling the person you're observing as well. And again, Joe has a great YouTube video on observing without staring and being able to take in the room rather than just which is also really useful. For me, the bare minimum I look for, this could be whether I'm doing physical social engineering or whether I'm doing phone phishing or something along those lines, is am I causing comfort or discomfort? Because that's essentially the breakdown of what I'm trying to achieve. I don't really care too much to start with about anything else. Just want to know, am I causing comfort or discomfort? Easy. Another psychological thing is certification. Anybody know what certification is? Kind of, yeah, pretty much, yeah. Certification is helpful. The simplest terms, and this is great, obviously common social engineer stuff. If I open the door first, somebody will get the second door, which is open the right door, they will return the favour. What's fantastic about the certification is you don't even need to do the thing. You don't have to do it. You just have to offer. And people will reciprocate based on your offer to help. And that is, can't get the door for you, or can I get the door for you? Oh, really sorry, my hands are full. Would you mind? Just because I've been offered to help, another person will reciprocate, and you'd be surprised the number of times that leads to this. Yeah. 2 coffee cups. Heard of coffee? 2 empty coffee cups. How are those? Would you mind? Yeah. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. And that's, it's a valid point. We're not programmed as humans to challenge people like that. We're designed to help one another. And so that's who you are. Specifically trained, in the military, very good at specifically saying what. And the big thing. A bit more psychology, friendship signals. And these can be non-verbal signals. And Jack Schaefer, in his book The Light Switch, which I highly recommend reading, is very good at talking about these. The first one, friendship signal, is an eyebrow flash. I don't mean raise your eyebrows, count to 10, bring it back down again, because people will think it's bloody weird if you do that. It's a 1/16th of a second flash of that. Literally raising your eyebrows. Practice. It's an acknowledgement the other person is there and you do it. The next one is the head tilt. So you do this, and this, for psychological reasons, is you're exposing a very important part of your neck, very sensitive part of your neck. By exposing that part of the neck, you're signaling that you have trust in the other person. You're not cutting his head off with a big sword. Carrying a big sword around then. And the last one is a smile. Now, smiles are important, and I suggest you practice it. Humans are very good at recognizing fake smiles. So if you can practice a genuine smile, and you can do it reliably, then smile. If you can't, don't. If you have a resting bitch face, yes. Stay away from that. Or practice a smile. And active do this. It's method acting, where you record something in your brain that genuinely makes you smile, and you replicate that. Think about that thing. Practice it in front of the mirror. But yeah, if you can't do a good, genuine smile, don't do it. Because somebody will know. And lastly, in this little bit, top life tip. And this is applicable to life in general, not just social engineering. If you want to make people like you, make them feel good about themselves. Complimenting. Oh, that hair colour is good. Oh, the shoes are great. Where did you get those costumes? Oh, things like that. Things that, oh, you've done a really great job there. You want people to like you like that? Start there. Thank you. You can be my friend. Very good, yeah. We'll be friends. Be warned. There is a flip side to this. Friendly people make you approachable. And you might not want that in a personal situation. You might want to rest in good place. You might want to keep on phone to the opposite. Because you might not want anybody to approach you. You might not want anybody to ask questions. So think about that. Does anybody know what this is? No? I knew you. It's mirror. Mirroring is a really simple but basic technique. And mirroring can be physical, but it's a subconscious way of signaling that we are on the same page as the other person. And it could be as simple as sorry? I wouldn't cross my arm. It's a good suggestion, but I wouldn't cross my arm. If somebody else was crossing my arm, I would take that as a discomfort. Because that is normally, you have to take lots of things into consideration, but that is normally a defensive thing. That is like, I don't want to confuse you, bored of the situation or something else. I agree, it is a mirror. You might want to mirror that because you don't want to talk to that person too, but be careful about crossing your arm. But it is a valid thing. It can be as simple as standing there like this. They're doing that, you might want to hang on a mirror the same. Chris Voss, who is used to be the head FBI hostage negotiator, has got a fantastic book I highly recommend reading that. And one of the things that's really key is he talks about it doesn't have to be physical learning either. You can do verbal learning. And verbal literally just talking, saying the last 3 words that someone has said to you back to them, but reflecting them after how you wrote it. That is mirroring as well. And it works really, really well. You think it's very, very obvious, and it's not. Most people do not know that you're doing it, unless they're also a hostage negotiator. But I can tell you that in the book, his son does this theory, and even he does. That's how good the technique is. So, a quick sum up. And I want to point this out because I think this is really important. None of these skills are natural. I am not a natural culture. I'm actually a bit of an introvert. I am an only child. I like grew up in my own place, and then I'm with no brothers and sisters around me, and quite happy that person really feels that. I'm actually an introvert. But all of these skills you can learn. I learn them, and I put them into practice, and I make them work for me, and make them work for my job. So, if you are an introvert and you want to be a social engineer, it's possible. Absolutely. I've done it. I feel successful. Really. So don't let that put you off. Just practice. So quick summary. Think about Miller's Law. Think about that 7. Do your on-site recon with some objectives. Visually find a badge. Practice with two tests at home. Get it out of the mirror and work it out. Be flexible and be prepared for surprises. Think about that as well. Mentally phone a confident state into that small full picture. Observe the body language and behaviour of people around you. And then all of these things are learnable skills. Okay. Any questions? Back left there. Right shirt. You've got an iPad with 3 written questions. Wow. Let's stick to one first. We'll do the first one, I'll come back to the second one and answer that. So you're asking, how do I cope if I go to a different country with different culture? Yeah, okay. Great question. And I've done this, so I had to do some testing in the Far East, Singapore, Hong Kong, etc. And my suggestion would be to build a pretext around that. You know, certain things about myself that I can't change, my accent, for example. So build that in. Make that your superpower, if you like, rather than a weakness. Make it a strength in some way. But also read up about the cultural differences so that you are aware of them. So that way you're not going to offend anybody by giving something culture. So learn up and read up about those things. But what you think is a weakness, i.e. your cultural difference, for example, make it a strength. Build it into your pretext. Work out how you can make it work for you. Okay, and the second question? So is it more successful if there are two of us, for example? Yeah. It is. It's nicer. It's not always cheaper for the client, obviously, because one person is cheaper than two. It's nicer because it gives you a bit of confidence. Because if one of you gets caught and burned, you know you've got someone else who looks completely different and you've got a style, that's you. So it gives you, as a social engineer, a bit of confidence. Sure. Person just in front with your phone in your hand. Yeah. 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 This is massively dependent on your risk. If you are protecting the crown jewels, for example, you might train you hopefully would train your staff to spot that kind of thing. If you are, as Andy said, a non-profit organisation, it's probably not relevant to you. It doesn't matter. So it massively depends on the risk that you are trying to, the thing that you're trying to protect and the risk to take. And then you have to try and either, if you're the CISO, prove that's important because they're now, and they should be, or either a test engineer gives you a report saying this is bad, and that might then help you straight. Yeah. Badly getting in the way of. I would say it was a layered approach, because ultimately badges are visually inspected and hopefully electronically inspected as well. So it's that business with how many layers of security do you need to protect the thing that you need to protect. I personally, when I got started, for example, I wanted badges out. I wanted to see them. I reprimanded James Biden for not wearing that. And that's it. He shouts a lot. But yeah, I wanted to see that because I wanted as many layers of security as possible. Okay? Good. You had your hand up first, so and then okay. I'll be honest, I've never had anybody notice me learn. And again, it's that Miller's Law thing where it's a steady thing. I've never had anybody learn. But again, it's important thing to notice, and that goes back to that, I'm going to call it comfort or discomfort. If I start seeing things that is causing discomfort, and I'm starting to do stuff like that, I might stop. But I've never had it. And it's the same with the verbal mirror, never had it. So, yep. So the Badgie 100 comes with its own attitude. and it's perfect. That badge that I showed you on there, that was made by. I see you, yeah. Yes. Yes, absolutely. And how do you get over that? I'm not really sure, other than you change the way you layer of security is. You know, in that particular instance, a layer of security is probably at the front of the door, and you highlight in a report that it's a bad problem. Okay, we'll change it because we can't change the building that they're in. We can't change the managed security guard who is being cabling away, and so they change it to the door inside. Yeah. 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 How do you use that though? You know, you've got a company that is paying, I don't know, let's say 100 grand a year to rent an office space. Is that company going to pay 150 grand a year to train that security? Or do they put it into the contract to say, we want your security guard to be highly trained? Yeah. How often do I get caught? I want to find some wood when I say this. Touch wood. I have never been caught. Yeah, I've never been caught. Touch wood. Can you talk up a bit? So, right. No, very. Yeah. It's a phone signal, yeah. So feet is a common one, pointing the feet away from the person. So if you are talking to a person, I'll use this example, right? If the feet are pointing towards the person like that, that means we're engaging in good conversation. If my feet are pointing away, normally towards an exit, look out for the exits, that means I want to go. Stuff like that. I'm really conscious of time. Yep, carry on. Sorry? Countermeasures and remediation. Yeah. Sorry, whoever's talking, can you not, so I can hear this gentleman's question. So remediation and countermeasures is quite difficult. Trust but verify is my go-to. Empower your staff to have the power to challenge anybody. If I've got the power to challenge James Dyson, how can you develop that culture within your company? If I've got somebody who is a janitor, for example, who can challenge the CEO because they're not wearing their badge because you've developed that culture internally, fantastic. I know of a company where the CEO purposely went without his badge on for the day and was carrying cash, hard cash in his pocket, and was giving £50 to anybody who challenged. Now, that's an extreme example, but it does work. Because you're always going to be on the alert then, because, well, I don't do that. So think about how you can develop that culture. It has to come from the top down, and that's quite difficult, because as a CEO, you want to be challenged by a manager. Nobody. Not many CEOs want to be challenged by a manager. So yeah, it's a cultural thing that you have to develop. Any more? What badge? You've got it. Thank you.